Good evening. Welcome to this beautiful St. Ambrose University campus, your diocesan university. My name is Jamie Loftus. I serve as one of the 5 vice presidents to our president, Sister Joan Lashinsky. I'm pleased and privileged to serve as one who can welcome you tonight, a great night ahead of us. Sister Joan welcomes you, our entire campus community welcomes you. Our campus ministry staff, led by Father Tom Hennon, welcomes you. It's an honor and a privilege to have our bishop present tonight and talk about his experiences. We're looking forward to that, Bishop. I would be remiss if I didn't suggest that we have a profound number of co-sponsors, and whereas it's listed in your booklet, allow me the time to tell you about them. The Diocese of Davenport, the Catholic Messenger, Presidential Center for Faith and Learning at Augustana College. I'm not sure where that is. No. Churches United of the Quad City area, Islamic Center of the Quad Cities, Quad City Interfaith, Jewish Federation of the Quad Cities, the Muslim community of the Quad Cities, the Congregation of the Humility of Mary, the Sisters of St. Benedict, the Sisters of St. Francis in Dubuque, and the Sisters of St. Francis in Clinton. Bishop, we're honored and pleased to have you here. May we start the night, as we always do, at St. Ambrose in prayer. So Sister B. Snyder will lead us in that. Again, welcome.
God of all and Father of the world to come, you live in the hearts of all your people and draw them into the fire of your love. Bless us all with the gift of your fiery spirit, that we may live justice and peace and be signs of your presence with us. For you, our Lord, forever. Amen.
Pacem and Terris, Peace on Earth, is an award named after a letter, an encyclical written by Pope John the 23rd. Unlike previous encyclicals, Pacem and Terris was not written to a Catholic audience exclusively, but all people of goodwill. The full title of the document is On Establishing Universal Peace in Truth, Justice, Charity, and Liberty. Pacem and Terris was issued on April 11, 1963. Pope St. John the 23rd died on June 3rd of that same year. The encyclical was released only a few months after the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis, during which time the Vatican and John the 23rd were working behind the scenes with Washington and the Kremlin to reach an agreement. It would not come as a surprise then that the document stresses the importance of negotiation rather than the use of arms when resolving conflict. On March 12th of 1964, Mr. Charles Toney, president of the Catholic Interracial Council, announced that an award named after the encyclical would be given to commemorate the letter and honor the memory of Pope St. John the 23rd. He announced that the first recipient would be the late President Kennedy. That same year, there was a hope expressed that this award would be given every year, a means of honoring the distinguished efforts of many in the areas of peace and freedom. With the award given this year, there are now 48 who have received the award. Many have also been honored with the Nobel Peace Prize. One has even been officially recognized by the Catholic Church as a saint. There are many great stories and many threads that connect the award winners with each other and with world events and leaders over these past 50-plus years. Monsignor Marvin Moddett, the 2008 award winner in his own right, loved to tell the story about how he received a call from the FBI prior to the award being given to Martin Luther King Jr., how they didn't think it was such a good idea to honor the upstart preacher. "We're going to anyway," was Monsignor's response, and they did just that. Martin Luther King Jr. learned from another recipient, King was so moved by the lived experience in Vietnam of his friend and teacher that he changed his view and opposed the war. In 2016, his friend, the Venerable Thich Nhat Hanh, was the recipient of the Pacem and Terris Award. You may have heard the phrase, "If you want peace, work for justice." Decades before he uttered the phrase, this person served as the Archbishop of Milan. In an attempt to push back against communism in his archdiocese, the Archbishop enlisted the services of an atheist from America whose expertise in organizing people and promoting justice in society. The Archbishop is now known as St. Paul VI, and his American helper organizer is the 1969 Pacem and Terris recipient Saul Alinsky. Striving for economic justice, so very important in helping maintain individuals' basic human dignity, was championed by Dorothy Day, Crystal Lee Sutton, Cesar Chavez, Lech Walesa, and Sister Simone Campbell, amongst others. And they were joined a couple of years ago by a theologian, Father Gustavo Gutierrez, whose seminal work from 1971, A Theology of Liberation, spoke not just of maintaining human dignity, but of the sacredness of the encounter with those who have been marginalized. Others have referenced their award recipient peers as having been their teachers, maybe nobody more so than John Deere. In his 2008 book, A Persistent Peace, John mentions 15 past winners that he had traveled to meet and personally learn from. During his acceptance speech, he shared that it was only at seeing his picture among his teachers in the litany of recipients, which we'll see shortly, did he first think that maybe his contribution to peace was on par with his teachers. Our challenge is to do as John did and learn more about the contribution these award winners have made, see the connections and threads. One need not be from as far away as Brazil, Peru, Poland, or South Africa. No, Manchester and Ottumwa work just as well for a launching pad to be a Pacem and Terris award winner. But the award recipients themselves would tell us that whether or not one ultimately receives an award for a contribution to peace and justice, we all have it within our means to be champions of peace right where we are. In doing so, we come ever closer to establishing universal peace in truth, charity, and justice.
President John F. Kennedy, John Howard Griffin, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., R. Sargent Shriver, A. Philip Randolph.
Reverend James Grappi, Saul Alinsky, Dorothy Day, Harold Hughes, Dom Helder Kamara,
Saint Teresa of Calcutta, Bishop Thomas Gumbleton, Crystal Lee Sutton, Bishop Ernest Unterkeffler, George Keenan.
Helen M. Caldecott, Cardinal Joseph Bernardin, Bishop Maurice Dingman, Archbishop Desmond Tutu. Eileen Egan.
Mairead Corrigan Maguire. Maria Julia Hernandez. Cesar Chavez. Daniel Berrigan. Jim Wallis.
Bishop Samuel Ruiz. Jim and Shelley Douglas. Helen Prejean. Adolfo Perez Esquivel. Monsignor George Higgins.
Lek Wallessa. Dorothy Marie and Gwen Hennessy. Arthur Simon. Don Mosley. Bishop Salim Ghazal.
Monsignor Marvin Mottet. Hildegard Gossmeyer. John Deere. Bishop Alvaro Ramazzini. Kim Bobo.
Jean Vanier. Simone Campbell. Thich Nhat Hanh. Father Gustavo Gutierrez Moreno. And Dr. Wadid Akri.
A brief biography of the Dalai Lama, His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama. In March 1959, as Chinese troops crushed an attempted uprising in Tibet, Tenzin Gyatso, the 14th Dalai Lama, fled into India. Then a young man in his mid-20s, the future must have seemed bleak. With few countries prepared to respond to China's actions, he faced a difficult task to protect Tibetans and their traditions. Yet, despite 50 years in exile, the reach of Tibet's spiritual leader has extended far beyond his community, and he is now recognized as one of the world's leading religious leaders. He was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1989 for his consistent opposition to the use of violence in his quest for Tibetan self-rule. But Beijing continues to view him as a splittist, although he has repeatedly stated that his goal is for Tibetan autonomy rather than independence.
The 14th Dalai Lama was born on the 6th of July, 1935, in a small village just outside the current boundaries of Tibet. His parents, who named him Lama Dandub, were farmers with several other children. When he was 2 years old, a search party of Buddhist officials recognized him as the reincarnation of the 13 previous Dalai Lamas, and he was enthroned before he turned 4. He was educated at a monastery and went on to achieve the Geshe Larampa degree, a doctorate of Buddhist philosophy. But in 1950, when he was 15, the troops of Mao Zedong's newly installed communist government marched into Tibet. As soldiers poured into the country, the Dalai Lama, his title means Ocean of Wisdom, assumed full power as head of state. In May 1951, China drew up a 17-point agreement legitimizing Tibet's incorporation into China. When Tibetans took to the streets in 1959 demanding an end to Chinese rule, troops crushed the revolt and thousands of protesters were killed. The Dalai Lama fled to India on foot and settled in Dharamsala in the north of the country, which is now home to the Tibetan government in exile. He was followed in exile by about 80,000 Tibetans, most of whom settled in the same area.
In exile, the Dalai Lama began the task of trying to preserve the culture of the Tibetan people and publicize their plight on the world stage. He appealed to the United Nations and persuaded the General Assembly to adopt resolutions in 1959, 1961, and 1965, calling for the protection of the Tibetan people. He has met political and religious leaders throughout the world and visited the late Pope John Paul II on several occasions. His Holiness the Dalai Lama has advocated a middle way to resolve the status of Tibet, genuine self-rule for Tibet within China. In 1987, amid protests in Lhasa against the large-scale relocation of Han Chinese into Tibet, the Dalai Lama proposed a 5-point plan in which he called for the establishment of Tibet as a zone of peace. But he did not move from his stance of peaceful resistance, and in 1989, he was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. The Nobel Committee praised his policy of nonviolence, which the committee called all the more remarkable when it is considered in relation to the sufferings inflicted on the Tibetan people. The committee continued, it would be natural to compare him with Mahatma Gandhi, one of this century's greatest protagonists of peace.
Despite their disagreements, the Dalai Lama has continued to seek dialogue with Beijing. Talks between the two sides broke down in 1993, and there were no more for nearly a decade. Discussions resumed in 2002 and have continued intermittently, but with no apparent progress. Tensions between China and the Tibetan government in exile worsened in the wake of the unrest in Tibet in March 2008, the worst for 20 years. Protests sparked by the anniversary of the 1959 uprising turned into riots on the streets of Lhasa. Violent protests were also reported among Tibetan communities in neighboring regions. China says at least 18 people were killed by rioters. Tibetan groups say as many as 200 people died in a crackdown by the Chinese security forces. The Dalai Lama is also facing challenges within the exile community. Some young Tibetan activists believe pacifism does not work, and although more approve of the Dalai Lama's leadership, a growing number are calling for a tougher line. There is also growing concern over who will lead the Tibetan movement in the future. In March 2011, the Dalai Lama said that he planned to hand his political responsibilities to an elected representative, saying such a move was in the best interest of the Tibetan people. Quote, "My desire to devolve authority has nothing to do with a wish to shirk responsibilities," he said. "It is to benefit the Tibetans in the long run. It is not because I feel disheartened. Tibetans have placed such faith and trust in me that as one among them, I am committed to playing my part in the just cause of Tibet."
Good morning, everybody. Brothers and sisters, indeed, I'm very, very happy having this opportunity, meeting with public. Because I always sort of talk how to create inner peace, irrespective whether believer or non-believer. Everybody wants happy life, successful life. So these goals ultimately entirely depend on our inner peace. In mental level, too much sort of frustrations and sometimes fear, suspicion, distrust, anger, then your life never be successful, happy one. So, in spite of what is sort of surrounding, we have the opportunity, we have the ability to create inner peace. So that also I usually call through secular way, not necessarily based on religious belief. So, meeting with public, share these points. I always feel very happy, and my commitment, number one commitment, on the level of I am human being, we are same. Mentally, emotionally, physically also, so we are same. And then everybody is they have this sort of desire to have happy life, successful life. They are also completely same. And then everybody have the right to have happy life. From our birth, everybody has the same right. But the problem, we sometimes neglect about these inner realm. We are trying to seek joyfulness, happy life from outside. That's a mistake. So that's my number one sort of commitment. And the second commitment is promotion of this harmony. Then I'm talking on the level I'm a Buddhist monk. So, according to my own little experience, I fully realize all Methodist traditions have the same potential to bring inner peace. So, closer understanding, harmony among the different traditions is something very essential. If we all religious traditions, you see, for the closer understanding on that level, make more common effort or effort for common interest, it can be more effective. So that's number two commitment. So all these government level, even United Nations, I think cannot do much. So public, because these things ultimately depend on individual. We are individual level, trying to create calm mind, peaceful mind. And that creates within our own family, within our own community. That's the way to change our society. So after all, society, community means individual combined. So sometimes I also feel I am just one single person. It's a huge problem. My effort may not much effect. It is, anyway, it's true. But there's no other choice unless individual level, you see, make some effort. It never comes as a happy society or change of the society level. So the initiative must come from individual level. So that's why I really feel something purposeful, meeting with people. So I'm very happy. Then also, behind you, the American Capitol Hill, magnificent building, and this indicates America, democratic country. Right from the beginning, your forefathers, these ancestors, they really committed promotion of liberty, equality, democracy, rule of law, these things. So since my childhood, we many Tibetans feel when we heard the name of America, we don't know much of detail, but simply we felt, oh, America, big nation, great nation, nation who fully committed about these human values, democracy, liberty, freedom, these things. So once more, I had opportunity to talk public here in the capital. So those people who organize this sort of event, I really appreciate. Thank you, all those who concerned people. And then also, I must thank the audience here, quite large, big number. I think today, weekend, right? Weekend, you must have other sort of program, go picnic, or today sun also quite good, sunny day, so you may have certain sort of, what's the program. But instead of being there, you see, you come here, in spite quite hot here. So I really appreciate it. Now,
so before I share my reflections on the presentation of the award, Barb Arlen Fye, the editor of the Messenger, is going to kind of set the scene for it. She's was with me. She was there to chronicle it and take pictures. And so, Barb.
Before I start, I want to explain, many of you probably are aware that the Pacem and Terris Coalition has wanted, many of you are probably aware that the Pacem and Terris Coalition has longed for years to be able to honor the Dalai Lama. It's been decades. And so when Bishop Zinkula arrived in 2017, he happened to see the panels of the names of the past recipients. And he said to Kent Ferris, our social action director, who also is in charge of the Pacem and Terris Coalition, that a name was missing, the Dalai Lama. And Kent explained, well, we've been trying to get the Dalai Lama and it just hasn't worked out. So Bishop Zinkula took it upon himself to write a letter to the Dalai Lama, and it was answered. And the Dalai Lama's secretary said, yeah, we can arrange an audience for you, 10 minutes. And so, you know what? To honor the Dalai Lama, he was not able to travel here because of his age and physical well-being. In fact, he's in the hospital right now. He has a chest infection. But anyway, so then we made arrangements from there to get to India and provide the Pacem and Terris Peace and Freedom Award to the Dalai Lama. And so we visited a lot of other places first. Bishop had a big agenda. So we started out when we actually got to Dharamsala. This is Dharamsala there. This is the foothills of the Himalayas. That's where we started out on our journey the day before we were to meet the Dalai Lama. We wanted to kind of set the scene and get our, get settled and everything. And it's just very beautiful. A lot of open air markets. And so what we did too was before we even arrived in Dharamsala, I think before we caught the plane there, Bishop makes lots of friends along the way, and he happened to meet a woman who was from Australia, I think, and she, when he told her what we were going to do, she said, "Oh, you've got to walk the Kora." And we're like, okay, didn't know what the Kora was. And she explained it to the bishop. So as soon as we got to Dharamsala and had our luggage in place, the bishop said, okay, we're going on the Kora. And a Kora is, it's a sacred path. It's a clockwise ritual circuit around the outside of the Dalai Lama's temple. And it takes about 25 minutes to walk. And so we started walking on this. And it's meant to bring about peace and a sense of well-being and happiness. It's meant to, you circle things that are called stupas and temples and drums. And as you can see, there are prayer flags there. So we're on the path. And these are prayer flags. And Buddhists and other people of reflecting on this peaceful, sacred path stop to pray. And there are lots of other people and critters that are on the path with us. I think those are water buffalo, if I'm not mistaken. And we saw a lot of monks and nuns wearing the traditional maroon robes. And so was just really beautiful, and we wanted you to see what we were trying to get ourselves prepared to meet the Dalai Lama. And so Bishop, like I said, meets lots of friends along the way. So he met a couple of monks, and we got a picture there along the path. A lot of prayer flags. And then these are the drums, these are the prayer drums, and you have to, when you pass by, you are to spin them clockwise. And people do it, it's just automatic, and it is. It's just a sense of peace and well-being. You're praying for the peace and well-being of others and yourself. And it's really neat. And then, of course, within the temple itself, there were these rooms, Bishop can help me on this too, where the Buddhists honored the Buddha. And so this was one of the, I guess you would say, one of the temple areas where we observed that. Oops. And again, here's another area where Bishop is, this is within the temple area where the drums are, the prayer drums, and just wanted to get another picture of that. I think we're going to let Bishop take it from there.
So people have been asking me, what was it like to meet the Dalai Lama? What was he like, And one thing that struck me immediately as we're in the waiting room, there's a window and you can see what's going on. He must have taken a break from audiences, and he was coming back to where you meet him. And the thing that struck me was that he's elderly. I hadn't been paying attention the last couple of years, but he will be 84 in July. And he walked slowly, and there's an aide, with him to give him assistance if he needed it. I mean, he was able to walk on his own, but that was the first thing that struck me. But he was mentally sharp. He was engaged, as you're with him and conversing with him. He was engaged in the conversation. And there was, there's a sense of vigor and vitality about him. When we entered the room where the audience was held, the Dalai Lama was very present to us. He was gracious. He recognized and received each of us individually, and he made us feel very comfortable. I've been telling people, what was he like? Well, he was like you would expect him to be. The Dalai Lama. That's exactly what he was like. He's a Dalai Lama after all. He's a master meditator, so he's, you'd expect him to exude, peace, love, joy, warmth, and he did. And while I was presenting the award, he gave me his full, undivided attention. He listened very carefully and intently. And I was hoping and expecting that I too would be at peace when I met His Holiness, the Dalai Lama. That was my sense of it, is to be this peaceful, wonderful kind of a thing, as I presented him with the Pacem and Terris Award. But I was not feeling inner peace or world peace, actually, to be honest with you. I was feeling some inner anxiety and disquiet, like angst is a word for it. And these are the reasons, because when we were there, you remember about a month ago, the conflict of India and Pakistan over Kashmir, remember that? So a few days before, the airspace was shut down for a couple of days in that area, and we wouldn't have been able to even get to Dharamsala if we wanted to have gotten there then. And so it's like, hopefully this doesn't last very long, but it was only a couple of days. So there's that. The world was not at peace while we were there, and then there's this kind of room where you kind of enter into when you first come into that building, and we were kind of hanging out there for a while, and then we had to go through security, even to meet the Dalai Lama. You have to deal with metal detectors, and they kind of hassled Barb a little bit about like her purse and all that stuff in there, and and her phone. We were going to take pictures, and there was a priest with us from India, a good friend of mine, Father Francis, and he was with us the whole time. Pretty much, he or another priest were with us while we were in India, and he helped arrange things. He was a huge help. So it was the three of us that were there, and so fortunately, I'd asked the Dalai Lama's secretary if we could bring a phone in to take pictures. There was an official photographer, but you never know, So he wisely found the email message from him while they're kind of hassling Barb, and he showed it to them that, okay, we got permission to do this, so let us bring this in. And so there was that whole security thing, metal detectors, and then when we got in there, we're in a waiting room, and you could see outside in the kind of the courtyard area, and we're in the inner compound now, and there were two security guards there with guns. So Dalai Lama, and okay, well, this is the world we live in. And then finally, we were told that they didn't give us an exact time for our audience, but his secretary said we'd be done by 11 o'clock in the morning, which was, that would give us enough time to get to the airport. We're up in the foothills, and this winding road and narrow, and all kinds of people and traffic and stuff, and so our plane was the last plane to leave this little airport. That flight was going to be at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, so 11 o'clock. Okay, we could do it. We had to go back to the hotel, which is 10 or 15 minutes from the temple. Our bags were there, grab our bags, we had a driver to take us to the airport, 45 minutes that would take. And so 11 o'clock, it's a little airport, shouldn't take too awful long to get through security and all that. But so that was if, we were out of there by 11 o'clock. Well, the audience before us took forever and ever and ever. We had 10 minutes, so I was just naively thinking, well, everybody's just 10 minutes. Well, this was a big thing that they were dealing with. Ours was just a simple award, and it would take very long. But so it's like 10 minutes go by, 20, 30, hour and a half, hour and 3/4. So we finally got in there around 11:40 or so, and I'm all, oh my gosh, we're going to miss our flight, and we wanted to go to visit this Catholic Relief Services site. That was a significant thing that we were going to do the next day, fly back to Delhi and then do that the next day, and I basically wrote it off. It just won't happen. But so, and it did work. It was a miracle, but we were able to get there. The 45-minute drive was like 30 minutes, and we ran to the hotel, to get our stuff, and Barb had this skirt on, and Father Francis had this cassock on, and it was interesting. And we got there. It was really great because, we're calling the airport, and this guy really came through for us. He got our boarding passes, and they were there for us. He was just great. And the driver took him 30 minutes rather than 45, and that was, it was safe, but it was interesting. And so we got there about 12:35 or so. And fortunately, the plane, when it came late, so the flight was delayed, so we had plenty of time. But anyway, so it was kind of ironic that while I was waiting to present the Pacem and Terris Award to the Dalai Lama, I wasn't feeling the inner peace and world peace that is exemplified in the award and in His Holiness. Still a lot of work to do on this peace thing. So here's what happened. So we're in there, and he greets us. So I'm sitting there and kind of saying this. Your Holiness, it is an honor and a privilege to be with you here at Dharamsala to present you with the 2019 Pacem and Terris Peace and Freedom Award. This award honors Pope John XXIII and is named after his encyclical Pacem and Terris, which means peace on earth. It calls on all people to secure peace among the nations. This award is presented by a coalition that includes, so I named all 13 members of the coalition, and as I was speaking, saying those names, the whole time I was speaking, the Dalai Lama seemed to be, you could tell he was trying to understand the nature and purpose of the award. I'm sure they told him about it at some point, but there's all these audiences, and he's trying to, okay, what is this all about? English isn't his first language, but he was tracking. When he turned to an aide when I mentioned the name of Pope John XXIII, he seemed to be trying to figure out which pope it was, what was significant about him, who is it, who is that guy? And then he reacted visibly as I read the names of the members of the coalition. He again, he turned to an aide with a pleased expression on his face, and he clearly appreciated the diversity of the group. That was a big deal for him. So I said the coalition has chosen to give this year's award to you, Your Holiness, because of your lifelong commitment to peace and justice. So then I read the award, what it said, said on the award, which is this. The 2019 Pacem and Terris Peace and Freedom Award is presented to you, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, by Bishop Thomas R. Zinkula of the Diocese of Davenport and the Pacem and Terris Coalition of the Quad Cities in light of your lifelong commitment to peace and justice. You have worked tirelessly for peace and justice and advocate for human dignity for all in Asia. The coalition recognizes your vision and your commitment to human rights, world peace, and the nonviolent resolution of conflict. It is clear from your words and deeds that you are a person who is deeply rooted in the spirit of peace. Your leadership is in promoting respect for the dignity and culture of the Tibetan people fills all oppressed people with hope that peace can overcome injustice. Your Holiness, you truly embody the words of Pope John XXIII in his encyclical Pacem and Terris as a spark of light, a center of love, a vivifying leaven to your sisters and brothers around the world. Given on this 4th day of March 2019 in Dharamsala, Himachal Pradesh, India. And I said, in April, there will be a gathering of people back home in Davenport, Iowa, to celebrate the bestowal of the award. And so His Holiness spoke in English, and he described the award. He described the award as a great honor. He said that despite different views among the religions of the world, all convey the same message of love. He said, all human beings are children of God the Father. There are 7 billion children of one Father. We are truly brothers and sisters. All human beings are of the same nature, so we should all love one another and respect one another. The Dalai Lama said that he has spent almost his entire life dedicated to inner peace and world peace, and he will spend the rest of his life doing so as well. He talked about inner peace leading to world peace. He said, it is important to practice loving kindness and forgiveness. Today's world really needs the peace message. He said, you show me this award. I much appreciate it. He made a comparison between receiving the Nobel Peace Prize in 1989 and receiving the Pacem in Terris Award. Someone asked him at the time what it felt like to receive the Nobel Peace Prize. He said that as an individual, as a Buddhist monk, he felt no more and no less after receiving the award than before receiving it. He said that Nobel Peace Prize recognized, quote, my little contribution to world peace. And that's the way he felt about the Pacem in Terris Peace and Freedom Award. He said it too recognizes his little contribution to world peace. So he equated the Nobel Peace Prize with the Pacem in Terris Award. Just to show some of the rest of the photos here. So Barb will, when I finish, Barb will explain those symbols, the meaning of those, the scarves and that symbol that we're holding. He gave each of us one of those. So, just to conclude my part, the genuineness of the Dalai Lama's hospitality and attentiveness was consistent with one who espouses inner peace. In a world that is often marred by ever-increasing violence, with each side harming the other in turn, a peace within approach might appear to be remarkable, but it is not unattainable. This champion of peace clearly is in good company with those we have previously honored. So I'd like Barb to come up, and she did the research on that.
He tells these stories so much better than I do. We received these gifts at the end of our session. As you saw, we're wearing these white scarves. And what's that? That is called a kata. It's a greeting scarf for friends, relatives, or guests as a way of indicating your honorable intentions and wishes of happiness. So at the beginning, Father Francis, we were told the night before when we were at our hotel, they said, well, you know you need to present the Dalai Lama with this scarf. And we're like, no. So they actually showed us how to present it to the Dalai Lama, that you would take it and drape it over his arms, his open arms. So that's what we did, or that's what Father Francis did. And so the actual, when you present it as a welcome at the beginning of the visit, that's considered a welcoming visit. But then I was surprised, he gave us the scarves, he put them over our shoulders, and that is intended to mean he wants you to go in peace and, for protection and your well-being. So I thought that was really, really neat. It's a farewell gesture to symbolize a safe journey. And then these were a little trickier. I wasn't really sure what this was, and so we had to ask his secretary. And my understanding is this is one of the 8 auspicious symbols in Buddhism. It represents a vase of great treasure, which to Tibetan Buddhists represents a dependent arising that brings all desired things unceasingly in the 3 realms of existence: desire, form, and formless realms, and peace. So that's what this represents. And we each got one, Father and Bishop and I. And I just want to echo Bishop's comments that the Dalai Lama was so warm and welcoming to each one of us. It was so natural to him, and he really made a mark on my life.
The following prayer is borrowed in part from the Jesuit priest Francis Xavier Cluny, who in turn borrows from 2 traditions. His own tradition, part of the prayer, is a famous prayer attributed to Francis of Assisi. And the other tradition is that of Tibetan Buddhism, and it's called the Bodhisattva vow. Bodhisattvas are enlightened beings, or Buddhas, who vow not to count their enlightenment as something to be grasped, so to speak. My own mismatching there. But they empty themselves, vowing to help all other sentient beings achieve peace and well-being. Please join me in prayer. God of justice and peace, make us instruments of your peace. Where there is hatred, let us sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. May we be safeguards for those who have no protection, guides for those who journey along the way, for those who wish to go across the water. May we be a boat, a raft, a bridge. May we be a home port for those who yearn for landfall, and a lamp for those who long for the light. For those who are tired, may we be a resting place. For all who need help, their servant. O Divine One, grant that we may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. Like the great earth itself and other eternal things, enduring as the sky itself endures, for the boundless multitude of living things, may we be the ground and vessel of their lives. For every single thing that lives in number like the boundless reaches of the sky, may we be their sustenance and nourishment until they pass beyond the bounds of suffering. For it is in giving that we receive. It is in pardoning that we are pardoned. It is in dying that we are born to everlasting life. Amen. May you go in peace.